to IEP Radio, a show dedicated to the education of all things indoor environmental quality related. And now here's your host, Michael Schrantz.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to IEP Radio. This is episode 17. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Jeff Bennert, Chief Operations Officer, and Jon Bennert, President and CEO of Air Oasis. We had a fascinating interview today, and I'm sure you'll find that to be the case, where we were able to talk through the technologies that they're using, learn a lot about the science, learn a lot about the research involved with these units that they're using, both the portable equipment and also some of the whole house solutions that they are offering. It was a great interview that I had with them because I was able to ask questions that I've had for quite a while regarding some of their limitations and also some of the concerns that we have or had prior to talking with them. I think that both Jeff and Jon did an absolutely fabulous job addressing these concerns, showing the research, and really just increase my confidence in the efficacy of these units, some of which are very clear. And even the stuff that I had always been on the fence on, these two guys were really able to be realistic with me and show where one type of technology may be a better fit for certain clients versus the others. Welcome to the show, Jeff and Jon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
You bet. Appreciate it. It's a real honor to have you both on here today. Jeff, I know you are the Chief Operations Officer, Jon, President and CEO of Air Oasis. And the reason I wanted to talk with you today was Air Oasis is now central in a lot of topics and discussions I have with clients, patients around the globe. You guys have really made your mark. And with what I have learned in the past couple of years, I would argue what I learned in the past 15 minutes talking to you before we started, you guys really just, I think, have your hearts and minds in the right place for people who suffer from chronic illness. I can tell you in the field, when I'm out working, a lot of the observations I make about Air Oasis are subjective and certainly anecdotal, which is why I wanted to dive into some of the science with you guys today to understand, to show the audience kind of what's really behind all of this. But in its efficacy, I see where I see these units seemingly having the most benefit to people who have chronic illness is really in large part, and I know it's subjective, has been with chemical reductions. People who have had off-gassing of building products or different sources in their homes or offices, it just seems like these units are shining through. So I know we're going to dive into that detail a little bit, but I thought maybe we would start with learning a little bit more about the history of Air Oasis, maybe perhaps from its conception and to where it is today.
Okay. Nice. Do you mind? I'll dive into that. Yeah, so, Air Oasis started a little over 14 years ago. We started off with one air purifier, which was the AO3000. That was our original unit, just contained AHPCO technology only. We really wanted to do something different. Everything we saw there pretty much consisted of a filter of some sort, a pleated filter and a fan. And that was almost the only option at that point in time when we first began. So we wanted to do something that was different, that could actually go farther than just pulling air through a filter and just, taking things out of the air. We wanted to actually, do more of a sterilization, as you might say, and actually break things down in molecular level. So send ions out and kind of seek and destroy, reach to far corners of a room and actually, eliminate contaminants at their source. And that's how we came up with the first AO3000. And then we've kind of built upon that product to what we have today. That's the short version.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you guys could probably talk about this for 15 years based off of the history. No, that's good. And I'll tell you, you used a couple of words a moment ago, filtration, and I like to use the word purification. I want to take a moment and talk to you guys about this. It's not an issue, but there's some confusion in the market and the industry about the term filtration versus purification. How I understand it is that filtration is simple. It's just the removal of a contaminant, whether using a filtration media, it can be filter-based, carbon-based, but it's simple. It's physical removal of the contaminant from the environment of where that filter is located. With purification, to me, it's more about manipulating the environment. It's breaking it down using different technologies, and we can talk about UV, ozone, ionization, PCO technology. Would you guys agree that that is a, broadly speaking, acceptable definition and difference between filtration and purification?
Yeah,
I think so.
we usually break it down to active versus passive.
Right.
Okay. All right. So active being purification, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When you have an active technology like ours, then we're actually emitting something into the environment that will actually be able to oxidize and deactivate bacteria, mold, fungus, virus, biocontaminants is what we like to call them.
Right.
And then the passive technology is when you have something that gathers the air and maybe brings the air through a filter or captures it in order to try to clean it in some way at that point, and then release a cleaner version of the air into the environment. So that's the passive technology. You're waiting for something to come into the unit. And we just felt like that was an incomplete way to do it. It wasn't very efficient.
Right.
But yet it was effective for what it was designed to do, and that was to take large particulates out of the air and make it easier for firefighters and things like that to be able to work in environments that were contaminated, and that could be maybe a lung issue in the future. And so for that type of application, it was great. I mean, no doubt. But they called them air purifiers, and they weren't air purifiers. They were just air filters.
Right.
And so we wanted to see what was available as far as actually purifying the air, but not just the air, but we started seeing like MRSA and MERS and these different things that maybe were surface contaminants as well. And we wanted to say there's got to be something out there that could, affect them in a negative way, but not affect an individual, a human in a negative way, or a plant, or a pet, for instance.
Right.
Me, I'm a pet person, so I think I was more concerned about my pets than anything else, because
Right.
I didn't want to put things in my home that was going to hurt my pets in any way, or my children, my grandchildren. And we used to always tell a story about how we were so concerned about the first thing that a young couple does when they come home with a newborn baby is put it on the carpet, put it on the floor. That's the dirtiest, most contaminated place that you could put a child, that you could. Pets have to walk across it. So we thought, well, there's got to be something out there that could help in that regard. So that's when we started researching different ways to find new technologies other than a filter.
Well, and you guys have. I mean, I'm staring at 3 of the primary technologies. I know there's a fourth, but I think you hit the nail on the head. It feels like somewhere in the balance of our universe, it's a combination of utilizing the different sciences to get a bigger stroke of addressing the contaminants, the stuff that you can get out of the air because either through diffusion or some sort of a laminar or flow that gets it to the filter for removal. That's great. But for the ones that are in the back corner in another room, they're not going to, grow a pair of legs and walk towards the unit just because you want it to. And so it's this combination.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about that a little bit. That's a great segue. In terms of the Air Oasis family, when we think about the purification or active devices that you have, if you can go on your website and you can see it, but you use what's called advanced hydrated photocatalytic oxidation. I know that's a mouthful, or AHPCO. You also use ionization, and then you also use ultraviolet light. I was wondering if you could describe to the audience in terms of those technologies, how you guys are using it. Is there any sort of synergies involved here? And why ultimately you're putting them into some of your products?
Want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you can start.
Yeah, whoever wants the mic on that one.
They'll fill in all the pieces I missed. So yeah, there is synergy between them. So really the main reason why we use the ultraviolet radiation is it's a fundamental part of the AHPCO technology. So in order to excite our catalyst and really make it effective, you have to have photons from a light source. So if you're going to have a light source, you might as well have a germicidal light source while you're at it, correct?
Sounds
So
good.
that's where the UVGI comes in. So there are, even in some other studies that were done from universities and so forth, where they tested several different PCOs. They tried everything from black lights to germicidal to UVA, UVB. I think one of the early studies at University of UT was, I think, used 5 different light sources on titanium dioxide to see which would have the best overall PCO reaction. So we just happened to choose one that was also germicidal while we're at it. So you have a broad spectrum UV light to ignite the catalyst and make it, be able to break down volatile organic compounds and deactivate RNA and DNA of biological contaminants and so forth. So those two definitely have synergy. You can't have one without the other, and achieve the overall goal of the AHPCO technology. So those definitely play a role. And then whether you're looking at AHPCO or you're looking at bipolar ionization, either one, you're basically taking water vapor in the air, humidity that's already present, and you're breaking that down into other ions, which then go out and do the purification for you. So we're not adding humidity, we're not necessarily adding anything to the air, we're just rearranging molecules.
Okay.
And so that's how both of them work. So they complement each other nicely. I don't know if you have other questions going to dig that deeper.
No, this is great. This is great. It's like I'm salivating because I know there's a lot there. Basically, it's a search and destroy mission. Obviously, on the screen right now, I have your 1000 G3 unit, probably one of the most common units I see in people's homes. So we can use it as an example. What inherently is it doing? You're talking about by ionizing this technology, it's going out there in the air, probably through diffusion, natural currents that are in the air moving around, and it's combining with certain contaminants, anything that will really bind to that charged particle. Am I saying it so far? And then breaking it down by stripping it of molecules, or what is it doing?
Well, I wanted to add just one thing to what John said, and that was we looked a little further. We saw some ideas on catalysts, but most of those were micron-sized particles, and they have to cover a target surface because that UV has to react to the components in the catalyst on the target surface. But without getting into proprietary stuff, but we were able to find nano particles to actually that increased the target surface, so we could increase the amount of ions being produced. So that was really important. We saw that, and that was exciting in itself. But those having more ions really put us in a class by itself as far as our catalyst is concerned. And I think that's the reason why it was so effective in that regard. Yeah. So the PCO technology that you hear about mostly was actually created by NASA. And they discovered what it could do in space, but they wanted to reduce the amount of ethylene gas being produced so that it would extend the shelf life of fruits and vegetables in space. When we got to look at that type of technology, we thought, well, it was incomplete, and they just shelved it. I guess if the patent ran out or whatever, then it got shelved. But we took that to another level, and that's when we added like 2 hydrating agents. We wanted to be able to create a specific type of ion called a hydroperoxide, and that hydroperoxide, in creating of that's what really sanitizes surfaces. That really cleanses and purifies the surface, as well as oxidize and other things, that the benefits that you get from the technology. And all that came from actually just a simple idea of NASA back years ago. That's where you hear that about the NASA technology.
Well, and you guys were nice enough to share with me some of these studies that were done, which maybe you could explain to our audience a little bit here. I'll kind of get it started of what we're seeing. But what I gathered from the 3 different documents that I have up is we have a report here that uses your nano-induct technology. So that's essentially the same technology that was used in this report back in 2012. In a 2,000 square foot warehouse. I mean, so this is not some little chamber or laboratory setting. It was more realistic to real life conditions, where what they did is they were looking at how different chemicals or constituents were reacting or where they were lowering in concentration. And I'll spare the audience all the drama. There was a clear reduction in total VOC counts, even over the period of 2 to 3 hours. I mean, you could see the chart here, and this is in parts per billion. I mean, it's very low concentrations that we're able to detect here. And other things, formaldehyde here at the bottom, again, a reduction. Clearly, this technology seems to be really work well with breaking down chemicals. And I mean, am I missing that on this in this technology? That's essentially what we're seeing here.
Right. And one thing I love about this document, which another reason why we shared it with you, is because we had this for a new distributor we were trying to bring on board overseas. And this distributor, didn't necessarily believe our claims or didn't want to believe them. We said, okay, we'll send you a sample to do your own test. And so we send them a sample of the product. They hired this lab to do the testing. And then when they were done, they sent us the results. So it wasn't anything that we, paid for ourselves. We didn't ask anybody to do the testing. They just, you know,
Oh, it was third party and then separate analyzed by third party yet again. I mean, it really was to scrutinize the technology. And I got to say, I don't know a lot of other companies that are in your general industry that even promote this sort of thing, which you guys are doing with us here today, at least. And this is wonderful. You're asking people to say, well, if you see something, let us know. But we're claiming this because of the science. Oh, and by the way, look, it works. And you could carry that story to at least with what we see in other studies you've shown. This one is more having to do with the bipolar 2400 technology, in that it was installed in, this is something we install in the ductwork. We'll get to that in a little bit about that. But that over the matter of 4 to 5 days, you saw a reduction in total VOCs. This is the first few days here. They at 6:30 p.m. on 10/23 of that year, they turned this unit on. And by, come Tuesday or come Thursday of that following week, you were down below the threshold limit of 500 parts per billion that you guys were aiming for. And this appeared to be, where was the setting here? This was inside of a ductwork in a home or an office? Do we know?
No, this one was actually done inside a school system.
Okay. Yeah. So again, real application.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of work within schools. So
yeah.
And the DMC were always a concern within a school because they have a lot of students. And I always say the number one contamination source in any building are humans. Every time we install, we breathe out contaminants. So you have a lot of students in a room, the VOCs go through the roof. So
what was great about this, it was a company that does remediation and those types of things and looking for air solutions in school, like John said, in school systems and things. And they came to our facility because they were using our units. And they said, we have to show you something. We were really impressed, and they showed us this.
Well, it's got to be a feel good.
It is, because we certainly weren't expected that. Usually when somebody comes and says, we got something we want to come by.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. Oh, great. Here we go. Well, and again, really appreciate it because of the real life testing. I mean, this is real life. Anybody can manipulate a test. Not that that's what we should always think, but it's just a lot more. The trust is there. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, is the science and the trust and the integrity behind your design and your intentions. And again, with me in the field and what I see, this is consistent. These units are really doing a great job breaking down a lot of total chemicals. I know that it gets beyond my pay grade when we talk about some chemicals are able to be broken down quicker or better than others. So it's not like it's equally breaking down everything with the same level of efficiency, but from a total count, like an average, it is just knocking it out of the park. Even when we take a look at this study done in West Texas at A&M University, this is the older model, which if I remember correctly, this unit doesn't even have the bipolar technology. Right. I get that right? Whew. And in that study, I know there was also the induct units that you guys were using back then as well. Again, we see, just to spare the audience the drama, this is a great study. They say what was done, how the samples were collected, the deabsorption tubes, how they were analyzed, that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, what you see is an overall reduction in the AO 3000 unit. You can see the red line represents when the unit was running, a blue line with it not running. They had induct purifiers running in the lab too. There were 4 of them. And you see clearly a reduction. So I feel like no matter what study, and I know you guys have sent me others that we're not going to pull up today just for the sake of time, chemically speaking across the board, there's just a clear reduction. And to me, that makes sense based off of the idea of diffusion. Chemicals are lightweight. They're able to react with this technology and break down. Life is good in simple language. I would like to segue into a question for you. I know we had a moment to talk about it before. I'd like to bring it up again, let the audience know your thoughts on this. One of the concerns we have, and that a lot of the clients I work with have, are these concepts of byproducts or intermediates. So a big talking point is ozone, for an example. And then the EPA came out with a document in 2018. Here it is right here, residential air cleaners, for those of you watching. And basically, I'll get to the part I wanted to talk about, which on page 9 of their document mentions there's these concerns about PCO technology, and there's the idea that they could generate formaldehyde, different aldehydes, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and that would be a concern. My question to you is, how does your technology differ? Because some of the technology you use it contains the word PCO in it. How do we differentiate and show that there's not as much concern here with your products?
Well, PCO is just basically, PCO technology is titanium dioxide and UV. So what we did, and we knew that was incomplete, obviously, because it would break down certain chemicals to form byproducts like formaldehyde. So we were looking for something that would not do that. You know, that is there something else we could do to make it more efficient? Well, we discovered that by adding other components to the catalyst, like I said, without getting into proprietary stuff, but by adding those extra components, and actually what I did was looked at the element chart on a basic, when you back in science, you probably saw the little element chart with everything on it.
I don't remember what grade I got in science, but I don't remember being a top tier student.
Well, they break them down into groups, of elements. And what we did, we looked at that element grouping and to see what else was in that group of elements that might, work better. So we started adding some other components to the catalyst, and that's how we hit on what we have today. Maybe we were a little lucky on that. I don't know, but certainly when we added these other components to that catalyst, suddenly we found out not only did it not produce formaldehyde or byproducts like that, it actually broke them down. It actually not, if it was present, it would eliminate.
So titanium dioxide is the most common that most PCO air purifiers, other PCO devices utilize. And so with our catalytics, we actually have 5 different catalytic metals. We won't go into which ones they are, but several of those are different oxides, and some of those are found to be, I think the highest one we use is 1,000 times more effective than titanium dioxide alone. Mm-hmm. So most companies won't use these other oxides within their catalysts simply because the price is outrageous. So right. Titanium dioxide is cheap. I mean, it's the pigment in white paint. I mean, or toothpaste exactly. Or sunblock, or it's common, so it's cheap. But to add some of these other metals we per you go from paying, a few dollars per kilogram to paying hundreds of dollars per kilogram or thousands of dollars per kilogram for most expensive ones. So I think it's the synergy between all those different catalytic metals that make ours a more complete catalyst and have more complete degradation of all these chemicals, as well as the extra hydrating agents. So like I said earlier, you have to take humidity from the air and convert that into the other ions that actually do the cleansing of the air. So if you're not attracting enough moisture to the surface of that catalyst to begin with, you're not going to have a complete breakdown of the VOCs.
Which obviously is your goal. And I mean, I think I can't help but the term "you get what you pay for" is appropriate here. I mean, it's all subjective, but you guys are doing what it takes to create a unit that actually works, not just putting something that looks fancy on there and it has a nice little cool blue light that shines out of the top, and then someone thinks that but it's not really doing anything. The science is definitely telling us otherwise.
Right.
So this is good.
Well, I have a background in wellness as well, and one of the things that we did early on, John and I we were resellers for other companies of air purifiers that were out there, and some very popular ones, even the same ones that are popular today. But basically, what we found out is they were just a box with a motor and a filter, and that was it. And they were calling themselves air purifiers. And, that was discouraging. I mean, because we wanted to create something that would really be helpful, even though, and we're not allowed to make health claims and things like that, which I understand. But if you could improve the indoor air quality in someone's home, you have to make them healthier, because look how many people suffer from allergies and allergic.
We fight the same fight, Jeff. Yeah. I mean, it's like we really don't know the direct line between reduction of this is going to equal you're going to feel better, but we holistically understand that when you stick yourself in a box, contaminant levels typically in terms of concentrations will go up. And so we're trying to counter that, because the reality is that unless we're walking around in the desert with a loincloth, it's really hard to create this quote unquote clean environment. And I know it gets beyond this discussion with even what's the quality of the outdoor air. So you guys are doing amazing things with this technology to try to bring you back down to a neutral level, even better, I would argue, in some cases. You guys have we've spent a lot of time talking about the technology. I know I've been focusing on the VOCs, the chemicals. I wanted to talk to you guys about the topic on mold and bacteria real quick. Can you give me your version? I know there's been studies also done. I don't have them up, but I have seen them where there had been Petri dish sampling. Tell me a little bit about what you guys have seen in terms of this technology and the performance in addressing mold and bacteria as just an example.
Let me go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and once again, one of the most original features of our product is the ability to, as we always see, seek out and destroy your active technology. So when you're looking at anything biological, mold, bacteria, viruses, not only can we treat air that goes through the device, but it can actually treat air on surfaces outside of the device as well, or anything that's surface borne on a counter or what have you. So we can help to, since we are technically deactivating whatever the contaminant is, breaking down its ability to replicate, and we usually call it sterilization more than anything. So we're able to actually reduce even surface-borne mold and bacteria. Now, if it's, we don't ever make outrageous claims. If you've got mold coming from behind your wall or embedded deep within a surface, obviously we're not going to do anything there. We have people ask us all the time, well, a competitor said their air purifier can go through a wall. Can yours do that? I said, yeah, if you throw it hard enough. But, otherwise it's not going to happen. So,
right. Well, at least you gave them an honest answer.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, the technology is great. It can do it can help to reduce surface-borne mold, bacteria, virus. It can help to treat the air and things along that line. Obviously, you're not going to, penetrate a human skin and help, make any health claims or help reduce a virus within a person, but we can do anything environmental. And that's really where we stand out, where we're apart. I know there's even, some debate on whether or not there's, mycotoxins and things like that left behind after you do deactivate mold spores and what have you. So the debate is always what happens with those. So with our technology, it does oxidize. It will break them down to a certain level. But this is why we've come back, and we did realize over time that we don't have all the answers with our filterless air purifiers. We can cover a broad spectrum of air purification, but there's always room for improvement. There's always things you cannot accomplish. And we found out that our users of our product kind of discovered this earlier than we did. And so they would have Air Oasis filterless technology in their home, and then they go buy a competing HEPA filter to complement it, so you're going to have overall perfect air quality. And so we thought, hey, let's throw it all in one box together. So with our iAdapt Air, we have HEPA and carbon, so we can absorb and we can trap. But we also have our AHPCO technology, germicidal UV, and bipolar ionization as well. So we cover a more complete spectrum of air purification with that device.
It seems like it's all jam-packed in this device.
Yeah, that's correct. So from there.
So I do want to get into the technologies a little bit. I think the takeaway here, I'll make one comment because then I really want to get into the fun stuff, maybe a couple of where and how would you use these products type of discussions. What I think, and I had this discussion with these guys to the audience earlier before we got on about their studies are definitely showing we use the word deactivating or making, say, a viable mold spore or bacteria cell non-viable. It will not grow. And that has its use. Understand that if you have somebody who's immunocompromised or is worried about some sort of pathogenic exposure where it can create disease or, say, like aspergillosis in the lungs, and where the idea of killing things or breaking it down enough to where it can't culture, it can't grow is a plus. What I love about Air Oasis and what I love about their family that are behind the scenes is that they understand this. I think iAdapt Air was the way to say, okay, well, we're going to try and break down as many contaminants as we can. Chemical, we'll try to break down as much as we can, microbial, but we understand that it's not a full spectrum device. We still want to physically remove when possible, and iAdapt Air comes into play. That's on your screen right now, to try and also add the filtration component with the use of HEPA, carbon, to physically remove the stuff that may still be present, floating around, may have even been deactivated, but it still can cause an inflammatory response for people who are otherwise susceptible. We think about people who have CIRS, that sort of thing, as an example of that. These guys are really, this family behind Air Oasis is really taking the time to get it right. And I can't say that for other manufacturers. There's other good ones out there, but Air Oasis, I think, is one of those people that holds the torch and leads the way. I wonder if I can switch gears with you guys a little bit and just have some conversation about helping clients, people who are interested in the products, if they were to go on your website like I'm doing right now. There's not 1,000 options, but if we were more in the residential sector, why would somebody want to get, for example, an IDAPT Air versus a G1000, a 1000 versus a 3000? Are there situations where one may be more advantageous than the other?
Sure. I mean, if you're, if you have allergies to pollen, dander, things like that, you need to quickly remove those from your environment. Go with an IDAPT Air. It's got large fans on it, pulls a lot of air through the device, traps all those particulates in a filter, removes them from the airspace quickly. If your main concern is odors, VOCs, and you really don't care if you have pollen in your air, go with one of the filterless units. It's less maintenance, more energy efficient, fewer filters to replace, and it's going to do a great job, as you've already highlighted, at breaking down the VOCs and the odors, and it can even deactivate, we have tests on viruses, bacteria, and everything as well. So
and I've seen those, and it does show a reduction, just to be clear.
So it can help in those areas as well. So really, it's just a matter of what you're trying to accomplish. If you have CIRS, and you're going to have sensitivities to the byproducts left behind after mold is actually killed off, go with IDAPT Air once again, because you're not, you're kind of covering the full spectrum. But you're going to have the quick initial impact of the HEPA filtration, large amount of fans, air being pulled through the device. And then you're going to have the more long-term residual effects of the ions kind of breaking down the remaining contaminants long-term. So,
John, what about 1,000 versus 3,000? How do we know where to go there?
Yeah. So as we always say with the AHPCO or the filterless technologies, it's really a matter of time more than it is space. So if you have, a living area and you have mild contamination, sure, it'd be cost effective to go with a 1,000 G3. But if you have new contaminants constantly been introduced to the environment, or you need a more rapid breakdown of those contaminants, go to 3,000 G3. You definitely do have a difference of power, which basically comes from the difference in the size of the AHPCO cell within those devices.
Yeah.
And you're just getting more ionized hydroperoxides, basically. So
it's producing more.
Right.
And you did make a point. I know we didn't touch at it online, but we did off about this concept of it's more an issue of time. It's always going to produce it. But, you guys worded it better, but the idea that these radicals, or I'm using that word, the things that you're throwing out into the air that are grabbing onto them, if they're grabbing onto stuff, it's not grabbing onto the other stuff. If there's not a high concentration of exposure, that may not be a problem because it'll keep up with the demand, if you will. A more, say somebody's in a really moldy apartment, they have a lease, they don't have a lot of money, they're stuck in this situation, they're going to try and make a Hail Mary pass, for lack of a better term. They may end up going with a larger unit because they're really just trying to zap that environment the best they can, because they're not going to remediate, they're not going to move, they're in a tough spot.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So many good things that we can talk about. Real quick, I know we didn't mention it yet, but CARB compliant. Can you talk to the audience about that?
That we can.
So CARB compliant, basically, state of California Air Resource Board is what CARB stands for. They're definitely anti-ozone in California. And so to be CARB compliant, you basically have to have a device that passes UL 867 electrical standards for safety, as well as ozone emission standards. So we always say there's two types of people in the world, those who love ozone and those who hate ozone. So rather than getting into debates with our customers and with anyone else who might want to debate whether ozone's safe, not safe, whether or not it's effective or not effective, we simply said, hey, we'll supply with whatever device you want. So for CARB compliant devices, they're ozone free, so zero ozone emissions whatsoever. For those who like ozone, I have ozone in my home. And for those who like ozone, which any of our units produce ozone, it's very low level anyways. It's not huge amounts of ozone.
Let's be clear. This is not by design an ozone generator. It's just there's the smallest amount of it that gets produced as a result of the technology.
Right. So, and we can determine that based on the lamp we use, whether or not it produces ozone. So we use non-ozone producing lamps in the CARB compliant versions. But ozone does have its benefits as well. I mean, if you really want to eliminate some odors quickly in your home, an ozone producing device, it does a remarkable job. They'll get rid of odor quick. We have customers all the time that have the ozone devices that say, hey, I know your device has a speaker inside that beeps when it's time to replace the AHPCO cell, but I don't even need that. my trash can will tell me. If my AHPCO cell goes out, I can smell my trash can again. So,
That's the meter they're using.
Right. So it works very well for odor reduction and additional VOC reduction and so forth. But there are people who are extremely sensitive to ozone as well. So it's not just a matter of what CARB allows or doesn't allow, but some people are sensitive. Usually people who are sensitive to chemicals in general are going to be more sensitive to ozone as well. So for them, we have no ozone producing devices also.
Well, and I would say that you guys are just giving what I use this with other clients, but the term is real talk. This is where we're at. None of us here are claiming that we know the perfect route to chronic illness. That's why there's an industry called chronic illness. We're all trying to figure it out together, and you guys are trying to answer and address the questions that industry has brought to you. I've seen it over the years that I have known you guys, and it's actually just really refreshing. There's a lot of people out there that take advantage of people, and we're all here to do the right thing. Certainly we all have bills to pay and that sort of thing, but offering a very fair product at a reasonable price. I think you guys are doing such a great job when you consider what it's doing. What about, you've talked about the 1,000 to 3,000, you've talked about the IDAP air. Can we switch gears a little bit and say, first of all, why would we go to a whole house air purifier, and how does one choose between nano induct and bipolar 2400?
Well, and I can start that one. With the nano induct, we went to that model because there's a lot of times where, for years we sold units that are countertop models, and they're great for cleaning the air inside your home, the environment in your home. But what if your central heat and air system is contaminated? What if the coils are covered with mold or bacteria? And obviously that's a breeding ground for those things as well, especially if there's any moisture. And people who live in some of our bigger areas, like for sales, like not California, but Florida, the Carolinas, Georgia, all in those areas, anywhere there's a lot of moisture, there's a lot of mold. So every time their central heat and air system would kick on, it would flood the air out of inside their home and recontaminate it with mold spores and bacterium. So it became a real issue. So we talked to some people. We started getting some of the contractors in the area and said, hey, what do you think? And so we actually came into the industry at a time that was great for us because we were able to interview a lot of contractors, get some good data, some good feedback, find out what they were looking for, what they didn't like, what they thought was incomplete or inefficient with other units that were on the market and were being sold, pretty popular. And we were able to develop technology and units that worked great for the central heat and air system and met all electrical compliances. All the, like I said, things that they had complained about, we were able to overcome with our nano induct products and then the bipolar as well. So it really made a difference, and that has become an explosive industry for us now as well.
I can definitely see that just from the terms of exposure, the more humid climates, even marine, heck, even Arizona, if the system's not operating properly, but let's call it like it is, from a numbers standpoint, it's so much more common to hear your more humid climates having potential microbial growth, biofilm type issues at and around the evaporative coil, if they have a cooling system, and the ability to have something that can deactivate or make non-viable is key to reduce that potential exposure down the road downstream.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So then that's that's the nano induct. Again, difference between that and the bipolar unit?
So as I stated before, both units are basically taking water vapor in the air, breaking down into the ions. So the main difference between those two is the nano induct does have a trace amount of ozone. Since some people are ozone sensitive, it came out with the bipolar ionizer, so you can basically get all the benefits of something like a nano induct without the ozone.
Interesting.
And,
okay.
The bipolar ionizer also helps to reduce particulates a little quicker than what a nano induct would as well, because since it produces both positive and negative ions, that kind of cluster around particulates and weighs it down out of the air and drops it out of the air. So it's actually more effective reducing particulates in the air as well compared to nano.
As a secondary consequence, perhaps good in this case.
Right.
And it's a non-ozone producing unit. There's like John said, people who are sensitive to ozone, the bipolar does not produce ozone.
Interesting.
But we do have, and I'll share a couple of quick things. There's always people that say, well, how do you know if there's electricity there, then it has to be producing ozone. And we use 12 kV of electricity going through that unit, which is the threshold. If you produce 12 kV or less, then you're not going to produce ozone.
Yeah.
And so when you go above that,
most of the audience didn't know that, because I know I didn't.
yeah, that's one little thing. And of course, also the distances between the two poles on the bipolar also prevents from the connect, the arcing, and so you don't have that electric arc that can cause ozone as well.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit more about bipolar ionizer. It's really a neat unit. So most people see the little blue box and they think, well, that thing's the size of a smartphone as far as its footprint goes. It's small. And they think, well, how can this cover an entire home? And so you see there's two poles, the positive and the negative pole.
Right.
Basically what it's doing, it's breaking down the water vapor into positive hydrogen and negative oxygen without the production of ozone. And then in order to basically, revert back to water, which is kind of a natural state those two ions want to get back to, is going to actually rob a hydrogen from whatever contaminant it lands on. That's how it creates the oxidation. And then it reverts back to H2O again, and the cycle repeats. So it's just recycling over and over again, doing the same thing. And then it also clusters around contaminants to drop out of the air as well. But those little carbon brushes is kind of the secret sauce and why it's so powerful. Forever, people sold negative ionizers, and it was all about how many stainless steel needles can we fit into a box, and the more needles you have, the more ions you produce. Of course, back then it was just negative ionizers. So you'd have things like black wall syndrome. So basically leave a static charge on walls or furniture, drapes, you name it, and all the contaminants in the room would stick to those surfaces.
We called it ghosting. Yeah.
There you go. So the good news is those contaminants are no longer in your air, but they're still stuck everywhere else in the room. So that's the downside. So, and then there's also a debate on whether or not that negative static charge would cause contaminants to stick to your lungs if you were to breathe them in.
Yeah.
So with bipolar ionization, you eliminate that because it's a balance of positive and negative ions. So you get all the benefits of a negative ionizer without the side effects. But also, you take all of those little stainless steel needles that were comprising a big unit, and you shrink them down to the 1/8 inch size of a brush, because each bristle of that carbon brush represents a needle point. So now you basically just shrunk the technology down to the size of the bristles on the end of a brush.
Which is why you can stick so much and so little.
Right.
And I'll dispel one I guess negative comment that we get from time to time, and that is people say, well, if it's producing positive ions, I thought positive ions were the bad ions. Well, there's nothing bad about an oxygen ion, because that's the negative ion.
Right. Well, and what was actually interesting to me was when John was talking too earlier, he was saying, it's a balance, because my understanding is that particulates can have different charges on them. It's not just positive. It's not just negative. It just kind of depends.
Right.
And this bipolar unit appears to cover, again, big surprise, a wider spectrum of what could be in the environment and how best this unit could react with it to break them down. If that's being an accurate statement, my follow-up question to this is there a half-life here to these products? I mean, do they just stay floating around in the air forever, or do they dissipate after a while?
So as far as the bipolar goes, for the positive hydrogen, negative oxygen, I mean, it's really until they come into contact with another molecule. So
Okay.
whether it be a VOC or a biological contaminant, you name it, or especially anything carbon-based, if it runs into anything carbon-based at all, is going to produce carbon dioxide and water as a byproduct. So, and that's just natural. When you're looking at something like the AHPCO technology that produces ionized hydroperoxides, that does have a shorter lifespan. You're looking about an hour. So you can only cover only so large of an area. Of course, even with bipolar ionization, it can only float so far if it runs into something.
Right.
Nobody has a 100% sterile or clean environment. So
yeah. Nor are you guys promoting such
yeah,
an environment.
Right.
Exactly.
Good deal.
It also doesn't produce any negative byproducts. And that's something that comes up a lot too. There's no risk of producing anything that's a toxin.
And let me ask what I know an audience member would ask, how do you know that?
Well, we know that because of you're reverting back to water vapor. It starts out by splitting water vapor into positive hydrogen, negative oxygen, like we say. And in nature, since they're oppositely charged, they come back together as water vapor.
Yeah. It's the strongest bond to come back to, so it makes sense that would be what happens.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Any other products here? I know that you guys also get into commercial. I think what I'm sensing is that, I mean, it looks like there's a bigger unit yet here, but are there any other comments? I know bipolar ice, any other things you'd like to share with our audience before we close today?
Well, I'll share one thing about the bipolar ice, because when we discovered how effective the technology, the bipolar technology was in reducing mold, we said, hey, we have a use for that. We had some people come to us and said, have you ever thought about maybe creating something that you could put in an ice machine because of the mold in ice machines?
Yeah, commercial ice.
Well, and that makes sense. I've been in hotels before that have ice machines where you get your ice, and let's just say I've seen a few settings inside of the machine, which you wouldn't think is the most hospitable environment. But you know, we both know that there's a range of environments that mold and bacteria can grow in that I'd imagine that one of these units could have prevented from occurring.
How many people go to a restaurant and say, oh man, I think I got food poisoning last night, and in one day it was gone, but they were very ill that evening? Well, then it never dawns on anyone, maybe it's the iced tea you were drinking.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the ice coming from that ice machine. And when we did it, we had Dr. Navran Ghosh, he's a professor of biology and environmental science at West Texas A&M.
Right.
And he decided to run some tests with us in a local restaurant, and they had a big ice machine, and he wanted to see how it would affect. Well, when they saw all the results and how contaminated those ice machines were and how effective, you know, the technology would be, the next time he met with us to give us the results, he didn't order ice for his iced tea when we were met at the restaurant.
I was going to say, why do I have a feeling that across the country, beer sales in restaurants are going to now go up and iced tea sales are going to go down?
Exactly.
There you go. Yep. Yeah.
There's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Out there. Oh, I was going to say, there's plenty of research and articles you can find everywhere about how bad the contamination is within commercial ice makers, whether it's hotels, restaurants, you name it. It's a common problem. It's finally starting to come to light. So there's several of us out there making devices now to help keep commercial ice makers more sanitary. It's one of the most overlooked devices in a restaurant or a hotel. Most of the time, they're not maintained until they quit working. So if they break down, then they go in there and say, oh, well, you know, we should clean it while we're at it.
Right, exactly.
Just scroll up a little bit on this device. You see, it is NSF listed for a food grade safety, also UL listed for electrical safety. And if you scroll up one more panel, you can see we actually won a Kitchen Innovation Award with this product as well last year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just fantastic. It's such a feel good with what you guys are doing. You know, if I was to summarize to the audience after talking with you guys today, this technology definitely has its place in its home. I think it's about appreciating where it may be more advantageous over another situation. Definitely going to be helpful in reducing chemicals, and the science makes sense. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit already, and certainly what I have seen, which I know is anecdotal, it's subjective, but you know, you got to start somewhere. We're actually seeing these symptomatic improvements with clients. I feel better when I use these units, and I think that it's all just about slowing down to speed up. It's, you know, I think where some people go wrong too is they just blindly make decisions without considering the technology, considering their environment. I think that everybody who's listening today who's considering one of these units are heading in the right direction, but slow down, read up on the technology that these guys do provide for you, that Air Oasis family has taken the time to show you guys to understand, okay, does this seem like the right fit? Because they have something that seems like for everybody. The iAdapt Air, which I know is a newer unit that we talked about earlier, is something that's trying to even be broader spectrum to cover both particulates that might be floating around and able to be removed with a filter, and still combining that same great technology that we've seen today has been shown to reduce certain contaminant buildup, certainly deactivate certain things, make non-viable mold and bacteria. We've seen the studies on that. And also know that what I also love, and I hope I don't put myself in the wrong foot here, but one of the things I love is what's at the top of the screen right now is a 30-day money-back guarantee. I've had people who I've spoken with who have been on the fence about buying a product financially. I'm sure you guys can understand that. You guys seem to be really good about, you know, if someone buys a product and it's just not the good fit for them, they can send it back as long as it's within those terms. Is that still an accurate statement?
Definitely.
That's accurate. And we have plenty of circumstances too where they'll buy the wrong product on our website. And then, you know, as soon as they contact us, our customer excellence team does a good job, or I should say an excellent job at communicating with our customers. So if somebody does purchase an AO1000 G3 and say, look, this isn't doing what I thought it would, then they do a good job of kind of diagnosing, what their expectations were, and they can move them into the right product to meet their expectations. So,
and I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. You're taking the time to give the science and understand the environment before someone because they may regret the decision to send it back or just not understand a part of what happened.
We've seen that too. We've had people that say they didn't think it was working for them. They send it back and they turn around and order another one because you don't realize how good it was till it's gone. So.
Right. How can, for those people that are listening who are new, best way to get a hold of you guys, best way to learn more about your products and services?
Yeah, always through our website. There's a contact us form at the bottom of the website. There's a chat window down the bottom right-hand corner. In fact, we're working on a pretty cool feature. There'll be in a chat window soon to where you can help you select your air purifier. So there'll actually be a computer automated chat built into this to where even as outside business hours, there's nobody on the live chat, you can answer a few questions in that chat bot and it'll actually help you figure out which product is right for your scenario.
Right.
So,
that's fantastic. And in today's day and age, if I need an answer and I want it yesterday, not that I totally agree with that, I understand it. And that's yet one more thing that you guys are doing from the customer service perspective. Jeff, John, I want to thank you both sincerely for today. I think you guys are setting the standard. You're one of the people that carry the torches in chronic illness. I think you guys are responsible. I think you guys are intelligent with your approach of technology. You've been nothing but open and transparent about all of the great things that you do know about this technology, and then also recognizing where technologies are limited. These technologies aren't going to pay your taxes. These technologies may not be as good when we're talking about physical removal of contaminants that may still have a body, like a mold spore that was deactivated from the environment. But there's so many good uses with this technology. And I've really learned a lot even today in talking with you. Thank you guys for today. And we look forward to what comes out of your guys' research in the future.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Very much.
The content of this show is for informational purposes and represents the sole opinion of the host and its interviewees only. Any reliance on the information provided in this show is done at your own risk. Additional opinions and/or research may change our current view of the topics spoken in this show. We do our best to minimize any inaccuracies presented and make legitimate efforts to back all comments with our own field experience, independent literature, or studies that support the topics discussed. This information should not be used to make conclusive decisions regarding your health or exposure. Ultimately, all questions and/or concerns regarding your health should be addressed by a qualified physician. Additional exposure concerns and/or questions pertaining to the health of your home or building should be addressed by qualified and on-site professionals. Any and all products and services discussed in this show should not be construed as a recommendation, endorsement, or guarantee that their use is appropriate for your situation. In short, we hope this information is of value to you, but please do not act upon it without actual and individual consultation and guidance by professionals who have taken the time and appropriate collection of data to assess your unique situation.